Maybe his memory isn't as great as it should be. I mean, I interviewed him once, he told me his memory was like Swiss cheese, full of holes. So I'd be surprised if that was his most drug-influenced album. I would have thought there were lots of competitors for that title.
The launch of the album also coincided with the tour of the United States. While out in America, Bowie became increasingly fascinated by the culture of the country he was exploring, ideas which would certainly come to fruition in his later career.
He himself had been very influenced by America, by the culture he'd witnessed there, and he was a big fan of Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, the Andy Warhol factory scene. Said that the perfect rock star would be something like the mind of Lou Reed with the body of Iggy Pop, and pretty much Ziggy Stardust attempted to be that.
It was in the lead-up to the next album that circumstances would alter Bowie's sound once more. A falling out with producer Tony Visconti meant that Bowie, along with new producer Ken Scott, would head off in another sonic direction.
Man Who Sold the World did not sell. And when that happens, you know, I think that people get a bit, you know, you get a bit temperamental, a bit touchy, you know. Whose fault is it? Is it David Bowie's? Of course not. It must be the producer.
It's hard to know whether his falling out with Visconti was necessary or useful or anything like that, but it was a thing that happened, and Bowie did what he's always done. He adapted, and he adapted so well that he produced an album like Hunky Dory, which is at least as good a record as any he's ever made, and you could certainly argue that it's his best.
Hunky Dory entered record stores just in time for Christmas 1971. It would prove a remarkable leap forward, the stone-cold classic that Bowie had been threatening to produce for years.
Wake up, you sleepyhead. Put on some clothes, get out of bed. Put another log on the fire for me. I made some breakfast and coffee. Look out my window.
I think Hunky Dory was one of the greatest albums David did. Terrific songs. Changes, Life on Mars. These are standards. These are songs that will be known in 100 years. And they don't have nothing to do with time. We're talking about a great songwriter, separate from the performance, the band, the singing, the production.
It's an artist with a canvas, which is incredibly fortunate that he had that songwriting ability as well, plus surrounding himself with really good people, and being an original artist.
It's Bowie at the absolute peak of his confidence. He has now established himself. He's a superstar, he's a phenomenon. He thinks he can walk on water, he thinks he can do anything, he thinks he can create one of the best records ever made, and he's just about done it here.
Compared with Man Who Sold the World, I mean, musically, it's not as kind of metallic, it's not as edgy, it doesn't have that sort of... It's almost memoirish at times, you know, there's a sort of piano tinkling like a waterfall over most of the tracks.
Oh, you pretty things.
I just think it's one of those albums which is the right thing at the right time and the right place. I think it's really good songwriting, really good craftsmanship.
It is a very strong album. I mean, it shows what a great songwriter he was. There's hardly a weak moment on there. You know, terrific songs like Life on Mars.
It's not as dark as The Man Who Sold the World. He's tempered it. He's even got some acoustic songs on it, like Quicksand is harking back to Space Oddity songs. But it does have some of his greatest songs, which would be timeless and ones he could perform, you know, for the rest of his career, like Life on Mars. Some say his best ever vocal performance, and yeah, I could go along with that.
It reminds me, I have to say, not remotely musical or indeed lyrically, but there's a similar sense about it as I get from something like Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run. It's like somebody actually deciding, I'm going to make the greatest rock and roll record of all time, and just about getting away with it.
It is the opening track of the album, however, that remains something of a David Bowie signature tune to this day.
I'm much too fast, take that test.
Most biogs of Bowie will immediately sort of quote Ch-Ch-Ch changes and say, yes, the chameleon-like Bowie. Of course, he has changed persona many times, he's changed direction many times, changed genre many times.
Obviously, you know, his whole 70s career was marked by changes, you know. Suburban boy into an international pop star was a big change for him. The flouting of his sexuality.
He's like your ultimate exotic chameleon, would be the best way to put it. And his ability to change personas for the different tours we did, I think comes from a very theatrical mindset. So I think he brought so much more to the rock arena than just a great singer with a great rock band. He had all these other things going on. And I just always look forward to it. I've even looked forward to the ones where there is no persona and it's just him and comes out in dungarees and we sing. So they're all very special, and it's always a treat to see what's going to happen next.
I think really it's still very hard for anybody to actually pin down David Bowie, which is lovely. I think that's very cute, and is exactly what I wanted.
You never quite knew what you were going to get, and this at a time when predictability was seen as a virtue, and I can understand that up to a point, because you know, if you buy a packet of cornflakes and you like them, you don't want the next packet to be ginger flavoured or something. So nevertheless, things were incredibly predictable and rather pretentious and pompous, and very little of the music from that era, I think, actually stands much re-examination, which is why I don't bother to re-examine it. But Bowie's stuff probably does.
He does this kind of thing so often that it's very, very hard to imagine that it's not deliberate. I think that's Bowie kind of writing a sort of theme song for himself, certainly, yeah.
Nobody should be at the peak of their career when they're very, very young. They should be getting better and better at it. Unfortunately, a lot of people in pop music don't, and it's one of the great mysteries to me, is whether you lose the muse or you stop being hungry. And somehow David seemed to carry on being hungry for a much longer period of time than most of his contemporaries, and staying ahead of the game and coming up with a new character, like an actor, coming up with or a playwright coming up with a new character. That's the difference between him and everybody else. And the very fact that I think the public rejected him when he tried to be a bloke without an image, when Tin Machine happened, I think proves the point that image was everything.
I really do believe that people should not go on with sequels or you know, part 1 and part 2 and part 3 and part 4 of anything, even films. By the time you get to Halloween part 10, everyone's had enough of Halloween, because the number 1 is always the best and the most effective. And it's the same with music, it's the same with people who reinvent themselves.